What do I need to be good at to be great at something?
Hello, everyone. You are listening to She Leads with Carly. And in this show, we talk to the absolute best, brightest, and yes, badass leaders.
Tap into where your natural curiosity takes you. Just making sure you're not your own roadblock. Even if you do fall, you're going to fall and you're going to learn.
Together, let's build a DNA of what it takes to rise to the top and truly make an impact. I'm your host, Carly Malatsky. Hello, everyone. I am excited to welcome our guests today, Ellie, Chen, and Jensen, Neff. Ellie and Jensen are the co-founders of Oddli, a sustainably sourced clothing brand where they are aiming to solve the problem in which 14 million pounds of perfectly good new material are thrown away every day in the clothing industry. Solving this is at Oddli's core, as Ellie and Jensen aim to boost our planet's health by turning this deadstock fabric into unique, colorful, and playful clothing pieces, all while enabling a special story that each person carries while wearing Oddli. As you will soon discover, Jensen and Ellie's partnership, friendship, whatever you want to call it, precedes the Oddli days when they both met at Stanford, completing their degrees in product design. This is quite a special episode in that I have the incredible honor to talk to both of these amazing and badass leaders together, and to two people that I personally look up to and admire so very much. So Ellie, Jensen, welcome to the show. So excited to have you.
So excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us, Carly.
Thank you, Carly.
Of course. So Jensen, tell me, set the scene. Where are you guys in the world? What are you up to? How's it going?
Great. We are both in Los Angeles. We are around 15 minutes apart from each other and 25 minutes from 20 to 25, depending on traffic, from our new office space, our very first office space for the company. And we're about to head off to New York in a couple days for 2 events there next week, our very first New York event.
I love it. Okay, as you guys know, I love to kick off the episode of going all the way back to your childhood. So each of you, I want to hear from both of you in a way of, tell me who you were. So Ellie, who were you as a 5-year-old girl? What inspired you? Who did you want to be? Were you passionate about fashion and clothing at this age too?
I love that question because I think I'm one of the most, all of my friends know that I'm deeply nostalgic and always reflecting on childhood and how we are the way we are now. I think as a kid, I was dressed the same way as I do now. Sideways baseball hat, long shorts, very playful, very much in love with sports as a kid. And I think that's what gave me so much, honestly, of which both of you get even more than I do, but the teamwork and the work ethic and the playfulness. And I think that I also am the youngest of 3, and I was literally from age 5 making my siblings lunch and selling it to them. So I think I always understood the power of, and it wasn't any crazy lunches. It was like stovetop quesadillas, but I understood the power of being able to, fascinated basically by selling products and the intersection of that, and also just being a really playful, pretty happy kid. And I think those two things, I loved getting dressed. I think that I dress similar to how I do now, which is a cool full circle moment. But I wish I could go back and meet myself now.
And Ellie, so when you say selling lunches, does this are they giving you cash, dollars? What does that actually look like?
So I think I underpriced. I didn't know good margins, although my expenses were paid for in the family fridge. But I charged 50 cents for microwave and $1 for stovetop because it took me longer and more effort. And I think total, wow, I probably made not a lot of money, but I just loved the feeling of having my older siblings pay me.
I love that story. And that's just okay, that entrepreneurial spirit goes real deep with you. I love that. Okay, Jensen, tell me a little bit about your childhood. What did that look like?
I grew up in Northern California, and my family was super active growing up, mountain biking, hiking 24/7. I had goats and chickens on my property growing up in a creek and really spent my whole childhood outdoors making with my two siblings. I loved building fairy houses. And then I also just loved, since a young age, creating things that people wanted to sell. I remember in third and fourth grade, I'd spend my entire weekends building bottle cap necklace stands and selling to people in my community. And then that translated into developing a sticker business of my own when I was younger and working with local shops and eventually Stanford when I was there, the student store. I just always loved the process of making and selling and how products could make us feel part of something. And like we got to enter a world that was created through someone else's art.
Yeah, I love that. And now it's actually coming back to me. I remember your Stanford stickers, which were so amazing. People had them on their water bottles and everything. I love that. And so for you, almost that creativity was a very natural thing. It just kind of seeped out of you at a young age too.
Definitely. I just have always loved making things. My mom said when I was 2 and 3, she could leave me in the sandbox for like as long as she needed. And I'd just be silent creating worlds in there and didn't really need much else, like any other stimulation. So I think it's always been what makes me happy and still is.
That's amazing. I love that. And so you guys both grew up in Northern California in this area, but you didn't know each other until going to Stanford. So take me back to those Stanford days when you first met. Do you remember that first time you connected, or what did that look like?
I think it's funny. We actually just had a bit of a full circle reflection moment because I remember the very first time the two of us hung out alone. We drove to Half Moon Bay one morning before school, and basically like other people were meant to come. No one else ended up coming. It was the two of us, and we ended up talking, I think, the whole time about basically Jensen and I share a deep fascination around consumer products and experiences, and even the feeling of we were in her old Mini Cooper convertible, like feeling the air on us driving to the beach, and both of us are fascinated by how even that car was a part of the experience. As a small example, we dove into the ocean before class, and I think at that moment, like, knew we were going to be both very close friends, very best friends during college, and what's grown into a working soulmate type of partnership. And then just this weekend, the two of us spent a full day at the beach, the two of us one-on-one, literally same conversation. What are the brands we're in love with? What products make us feel best, bring people together? Just very similar. It's a pretty special and thoughtful.
Yeah, I think it's cool to meet someone. We met second day at Stanford, and I think our friendship has always been knowing we wanted to build something together. And it's really cool to gain more respect for someone over time. Like, I think that our friendship probably started out, has gone through waves of being more purely friendship and more work focused. And obviously right now it's more work focused than ever. And I think that we can do that dance really well together because we truly do feel so passionate about consumer in the same way and have the same love of it and have the same love of story and the way that products play into stories. It's always been that way.
So, and you guys both ended up studying product design at Stanford, which we'll dive into a little bit. But at this moment, Jensen, you kind of mentioned that you, from day one, in a way, you guys realize you have this passion. You high potentially want to start something together. So during Stanford, did you kind of think, okay, post Stanford, we'll be starting a company together, or was it nowhere near like that real, and more so just high picture, high level, maybe we'll be doing something together?
It's a great question. I think that I'd say our time during Stanford was spent studying the world together. Like, we really did. We're just curious about everything together and soaking up what consumer could look like in different industries. And that manifested in us co-leading Stanford Women in Design's sustainability conference together, which was the first tactical time that we got to take everything that we had noticed and learned in the consumer world, from food to fashion to in-person museum experiences and the products that played into that, and actually allow ourselves to choose speakers from companies that we looked up to doing sustainable consumer in ways that we respected and invite them to Stanford's campus. That was a year-long process of working together, leading 80 younger women. And I think it really just was the coolest experience learning from those older women that we respected, from Patagonia, Fagu, Allbirds, Impossible Foods. And we were so nervous, and also saw really clear examples of who we wanted to be 10, 20 years down the line in our own careers.
Wow, I love that. So, okay, before we even get into Oddli and how that started, Ellie, take me briefly through what is product design, what excited you about it, and how did you kind of navigate that major and saying, okay, this is a great stepping stone for wherever I want to go?
So product design at Stanford is within the mechanical engineering department, but it has also a focus on art, design, and psychology. I think I was drawn to it because it's such a special one. There's like 60 kids in it, and you get to know every single kid. And I think there's no more powerful way to create and bring something into the world than to work with people who have different, so maybe similar interests, but really different strengths and ways of approaching problems. And I think that the core of product design to me that was so fun is it's truly like, what products and experiences do people in the world need and why? And then going a few layers deeper and studying. One of our school projects was working with Target and thinking about how they do their mission of creating family joy and going down to literally what people first feel when they walk into the stores. So I think that's the part I also love. It's an amazing combination of like Jensen is an incredibly gifted artist and engineer. She's kind of can do everything. And then I think that I love storytelling, I love writing, and I love math. So there was room for both of us in the major, and we kind of had very overlapping complementary skills.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. And obviously, as I experience, as you likely experience, as you go through Stanford, there's quite a tangible energy of like, oh shit, what's next? You know, people doing consulting interviews, people going to 8 p.m. programs and banking and all the different paths. How are you guys thinking of, you know, right after Stanford, this is where we need to go? Or like, did you have ever that oh shit moment? Or was it like, we got to go grounds deep with this company?
I think that, at least for me, kind of what I mentioned earlier, the timing was really great of doing that conference and being able to see direct role models that made me really sure of where I wanted to go in my career. I think both Ellie and I both have different side interests, but we knew that especially right post-grad, we both wanted to work in consumer. And I think that both of us got close with a color designer from Patagonia. We're lucky enough to go view their office space and see how they worked. And then being so confirmed and energized by that, I think I knew that I was supposed to be an entrepreneur. Ellie knew too. Both of us say we're so lucky that we've never doubted it once. And then second, I think there was a cushion created by the time of COVID where there was a lot less pressure around following a linear path and no one was asking about it. And so it allowed us to say, let's do a 3-month test of this company, see how sales go, see how pre-order goes. And if it doesn't go well, we get a full-time job, and it went well enough that we said, let's try a year. So we took everything really linearly. And at that point, when we did the 3-month test and had a 8,000 person wait list already, and we're using that as our proof of concept. So I never had a moment of doubting. And I also do feel lucky for that, because I think part of that was different pieces of the world coming together to create a mindset where I wasn't afraid. Oh, what would you say on that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, of course, there's always pressure to follow a certain path. I definitely felt it throughout some times at Stanford and just growing up. But I think that being an entrepreneur, like every day, I'm like, this is a choice and a great privilege and joy to be able to work on this and to be able to go through whatever challenge or success we're going through on a given day. And I think that going to a school like Stanford affords people the opportunities to follow a dream. It really does. Just like the teachers you meet, the people you go to school with, I felt like I would be it wouldn't be right if I didn't try. And then once we got all the demand, it was pretty clear that we had to go for it.
So, okay, we'll get into the 8,000 person wait list, because that's insane. That's ridiculous, right? To see that number and be like, okay, there's traction. But before even that point, did you have people in your circle being like, okay, guys, this is great, but it's a bit crazy. Like, don't put all your eggs in this basket. And even more so, you hear often, friends should stay friends. Like, they shouldn't go into business together. And that's scary. So did you have those voices coming at you? And how did you kind of navigate that?
It's a really good question. I don't think we've ever been asked that before.
Well, now's the time.
I love it. I mean, I think there are always, there was sort of two questions. The one about going into business with a dear friend, and then the one about whether people had doubts about us pursuing it. I think that there was definitely a certain time where I do feel like it's hard to say as an entrepreneur how many of the whispers are in my own head and projected of my own worries at a given time versus what's actually being said. But I do think that I'm sure people were saying stuff like we started out with 10 handmade clothing pieces. And I think that from Stanford, or even with any mindset of starting a company, people often picture like an exponential growth in a tech company off the bat. And what Jensen and I are building, we hope it will be one of the next biggest consumer brands for Gen Z, but it takes time. This is a long-winded answer, but I'm basically saying that at the beginning, I'm sure people did say things. I don't know if I was as aware of it. I feel so lucky that all of our friends and family were so supportive, and that more than anything, we just believed in it. And that was enough every day.
Yeah, I adored our world of Stanford people. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Our friend group from college, just, every product that comes out from the very beginning to now, they always comment and buy and are just so proud of us, and the same for us for their careers. I just think that's a really cool part of the Stanford world. I do think there's always critique. There's a lot of critique. Part of Ellie and I's friendship, the helpful thing about our working partnership and friendship is that with each other, there's always another person to build the other up. And we kind of have a bit of an invincibility field working together. I also think I've just always been so aware of how easy it is to join a ship that's already doing well, no matter what sphere it's in or already has momentum, and how easy it is to critique, and then how difficult it is to build the structure of a ship. And I think that I believe in Ellie and I doing that. And over time, opinions are fickle. And if you keep working towards something, like, they will change no matter what. And I think both of us are aware of that. So our core people, we're so lucky for a circle of love that was supportive. And then other than that, it's like building up that hard shell.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's so important, like what you said, having this team of champions, essentially champions behind you. I think it's so important. And I see it a lot, even from a solo founder to co-founders together. And it's hard. Like, starting a company in general is freaking hard. And then if you're a solo founder, it's even harder, saying like they're alone at the top. You've heard that sentiment. So I really love that. I think it's so true. And so, Ellie, you mentioned how you guys started off with 10 clothing pieces. By the way, is this you guys sewing it, building it, creating them yourselves, or how did you go about this?
Yeah, so it was Jensen. It was our final project for product design in our senior year, and Jensen was hand sewing every single piece. Basically, the initial thing that we said was everything in these pieces was going to be thrown away. So we were you mentioned in our introduction, but basically found out in the class just how much fabric goes to waste. It's the 14 million pounds every day of full rolls of fabric, doesn't count even clothing waste. But Jensen, we basically made 10 initial patchwork pieces. Jensen's really incredible with her hands and at creating beautiful things and knowing what people want to buy. And our goal for the end of the project was to sell those 10 pieces. We ended up selling them out in a few seconds and had put our story on social media, gotten a ton of traction, and that's where the initial wait list came from.
That's crazy. And okay, this may be a completely naive question, but in my mind, why is so much fabric being thrown away? Like, does the quality go down? What is the reason? Is it not just kept in a maintainable way? What is the reason why they need to actually throw it away?
First, the legislation in the fashion industry is really loose. So there's no pressure for brands. There's basically no pressure for documenting where that fabric goes. Let's say it's a Macy's that over orders a red roll of fabric. There's no law saying, or very little legislation around it. Number two is that sometimes the fabric can be core to the brand's look. So if a Levi's comes out with a certain type of fabric, sometimes it's part of their collection look, so they don't want it to be recrafted into other pieces because it's core to them. And then the third, I think, is a covering of their own tracks. A lot of these heritage brands are basically discarding so much fabric, and by burning it, it's out of sight, out of mind. And I'd say that's probably the main reason. It's more expensive for them to keep it in the loop, in a circular economy loop, than it is for them to discard of it. So cost and covering tracks is the final one for these big brands.
And so for you guys, when you saw this, like, you know, getting these pieces of clothing brought within seconds and kind of going off on social media and having that, was there a moment where you're like, okay, we're going all in? Was there a conscious decision, a conversation that you had between each other saying like, we're doing this? How did that happen?
Jens, do you want to tell from how you remember it?
Sure. We were hiking from Marin across the Golden Gate Bridge to my sister's apartment as our post-grad trip because it was deep COVID. And
okay,
all summer, I mean, we had both been road tripping, hiking in Yellowstone, just spending the summer outdoors, but also spending the summer. Truly, I was bringing around in my car my mom's sewing machine, and every moment I got figuring out how to use these social media platforms, put the pieces online. Both of us were in love with it. Ellie was spending hours researching business modeling of a business plan and all the details around finances, etc. She was like, if basically we're overlooking the Golden Gate Bridge, and she's like, Jens, if we don't try it now, we're not going to. Like, if both of us get full-time jobs, we're not going to come back and do it together. This is our time if we want to, and I think we should. And then I think we both knew we had to try. But that was a 3-month try. That was talking about 3-month try.
Still, I really love that. I think, first of all, it's just, there's so much bravery in that too. And like Ellie kind of recognizing, look, like if we don't do it now, it's going to be never type of thing. And even, we'll talk about it too, but it's funny because Ellie's childhood entrepreneurial venture with selling her school lunch and Jensen kind of making these, you know, stickers and whatnot. I feel like it definitely like effortlessly translated to your roles now at Oddli. You know, business model, finance. Is that true? Does that kind of translate well?
That's true. Jensen is, I just feel lucky every day that I get to work with her. She's the head of creative. I really do think that she's gifted, both in how she uses the tools that are at everyone's fingertips every day on our phones through social media and with art and product. She gets what people want to buy into and what people want to be a part of. And on my end, I think that I do everything to do with business strategy, bringing the community together. And I think that it's such a gift just to be able to think about how do we get this incredible product in front of as many people as possible.
And okay, from the outside, right? For me, I've just been like an Oddli fan, right? Like an incredible fan from the outside. And so, but right now I have like the privilege to talk to you guys and be like, okay, what is it actually like of, starting your own company, direct to consumer? What has been a moment almost where, shit hits the fan? Can we do this? All the imposter syndrome that we hear today. Have you guys faced that individually, collectively? What has that been like?
Definitely. First of all, that's so sweet that you're a fan. I'd say like if Ellie and I both didn't just love building something, it would not be worth it. And I kind of can tell when people are asking us, a lot of times people will try to get confirmation from the outside that they should go for something full time. And I really do believe it has to be from within them. They have to know deeply that they want to go for it. And there has to be, obviously there's always a tiny bit of doubt, but little hesitation and an immense amount of passion, because there's really hard parts of it.
Mm-hmm.
It is really, really hard at times.
I would say that what's been adjustment for me is we started it as a school project and everything's theoretical. I think we made $650 off those first 10 pieces and felt like we were so rich. And then I think that you take something from a school project to a business, and if you're lucky and hardworking enough and have an incredible product or something to bring to the world, like we have been up to this point, things will grow. And with that comes a lot more responsibility. And it came paying the two of ourselves full time. It came hiring someone else and paying her full time. It's also paying the dozens of people who touch our product along the way and who are creating it. And that's a lot as a 24-year-old or at any age to fall asleep thinking about, and just think about not only how are you going to continue to exist, but how are you going to continue to grow in a way that we're proud of, continue to bring on people who are top talent and be responsible for paying them. So that's something that I've struggled with and just gotten more used to with time. It's kind of like a bit of stress and pressure are a part of it. And it's about like being able to continue to perform and believe every day within that.
And these decisions, like what you mentioned, Ellie, these questions that you're asking, these, decisions you have to make, they're not necessarily intuitive, right? You don't learn them in the Stanford classroom in a product design major necessarily. And so given that, what has been, these people, have there been mentors that guide you? How have you kind of navigated the different questions? Or is it more maybe research on your own? How do you kind of go about it?
A mix of things. I think 3 things. The first, mentors. I have had some incredible business mentors who, especially in the last year, really felt like the first full year, because it was the first year that manufacturing was really smooth and that the brand was just really coming into its own. And I think I really leaned heavily on mentors over that year. Even this year, I feel like I do things a bit more on my own because I got a little bit of a foundation, but mentors are incredible. Yeah. Be a ton of time talking to Jensen, honestly, because just no one gets it more, and she helps me think through a lot and is an incredible decision maker too. / like, yes, YouTube, anything online, everything can be learned, other than the ability of like having a deep internal compass and thinking about how you want to treat people and how you want to lead, which I think is something that I work on every day and take pride in.
I love that. I absolutely love that. And okay, Jensen, this is obviously first company. What surprised you about this whole process? Or even what has been something that people rarely talk about, of saying, this is what it's like to found your own company?
Oh my gosh, there are so many different things that come to mind that have surprised me. But I think that I'm always just so in awe of the way that product can build community and how much more magical and incredible and powerful it was than I even imagined it to be. And the feeling of seeing younger women. I mean, I was someone who really did define myself with consumer, and seeing female founders build things helped me figure out who I was. And I feel like just being aware that everything you're putting out into the world has a ripple effect. And even if it's one person it's affecting, like being sure to your core what you want to say, because once you put it out into the world, it can be even more powerful than you think it is.
For sure. I think it's interesting because there's even a ripple effect of, I think now more than ever, when you have consumer and then you have social,
Yeah.
the effect that you have is actually huge. And like you guys are on TikTok, that's kind of, taking off there. And then Instagram, like you've seen, people can become viral in, overnight. And so it's almost like making sure that intentionality is there of saying, okay, this is what we're putting out there in the world. And, we don't necessarily know how big of a scale it can get, but it's recognizing that in a way. So
and I think, sorry, adding on one more thing, the fashion industry is not often built on inclusivity and kindness. And I think I've been shocked by how much it's needed in the industry and how much tiny actions of it come back to the brand. Like any moment of including a younger woman, even if it was 2 years ago, I've found it coming, repaying the brand in dividends. And I just think it's always worth it to build with a lens of inclusivity and kindness. It really has paid back the brand already. And not that that's the goal, but.
Yeah, no, I love that. And it even got me thinking, and Ellie, I'd love also your thoughts too about, like, I think with fashion industry particularly, it's all visual, right? It's not like tech where it's necessarily like behind the scenes or, a tool that companies are using. It's very much in your face. So because of that, all the societal issues, the discrepancy, talking about inclusivity, it's very much there. And it's even more shocking, like you said, Jensen, where it's still behind, or that it was behind. But yeah, it's fascinating. Is that something that, at least Ellie, like, is that something you guys thought of saying going into the fashion industry, this is something that we have to almost like have our moral compass be quite on?
I think going back to your last question about what surprised me about building a brand, and it relates to the moral compass, is that when you're putting something into the world, you never know what specific part is going to fully resonate until you put it out. And I think that Jensen and I started the school project with a really strong vision around the planet, which is still really core to what Oddli is. I never want it not to be, but I think that we found over time that it was more the community and the creativity that was built around that kindness that Jensen mentioned, and built around, I actually just got a message today being like, I saw someone wearing Oddli and I became friends with her through that. I think the community has a really strong pulse to it. And I think that's what we kind of kept following, because when we put it out there, we didn't go into Oddli being like that was going to be the main thing. It ended up being the main thing because it's what the industry needs. And it's what Jensen and I naturally, I think it suits both of our characters really well. And the two of us balance each other out really well in approaching the fashion industry in those ways.
I love it. And you mentioned how being an all-female founding team, right? And that's unique in its own sense. And still to this day, we have problems where there's a huge discrepancy among, male to female funding and founding and whatnot. What advice would you guys give to, other females who want to start a company and kind of navigating that, what that looks like, whether it's direct to consumer, whether it's B2B, whatever it may look like? What is something that you learned through your own experience that could be kind of passed down?
I would say we're in a moment where, sorry, it's just watching the wheels turn in Jensen's head, but I will jump in and I will say that tools are at our fingertips now. You don't need, at least in the clothing, Jensen and I do something where we often ask ourselves, if we were starting now, what product would we build? Because we know obviously a lot more now than we did then. Anyways, so basically within consumer and within clothing, the barrier to entry is amazingly low. You can create a product. There's not a lot of regulation. You don't need a ton of money. You can see if it has demand through social media. And I would encourage people to test and put things out there, learn from what's going well, learn from what isn't, and continuously being able to keep going. We've been scrappy. We've mostly bootstrapped. We were profitable at the end of last year and have taken on minimal funding, but mostly want to grow into a really huge bootstrapped profitable brand. And I would say that that's possible too in a lot of industries, and not always talked about as much, at least at Stanford.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. I think you touched on so many points. Even I love that you mentioned of just getting started. It seems like such a daunting thing, but it's that little, that one step of just, put something out there. Maybe it'll stick, maybe it won't, but just like continue grinding through. I think that's so valuable. And people kind of think of like, oh, but in 5 years, like it's too hard to get there. So I really appreciate that.
Just pay attention at the very beginning to what parts energize you and what parts are taking away. Because at the beginning of a company, you will be doing everything. Jensen and I both still do so much, but I think that from the first time I put something for sale and then saw those pieces on people, I was like, I'm addicted to that feeling, and anything else is worth it to keep pursuing that. And I think that you can sense within yourself from very beginning in entrepreneurship if you're going to like certain parts of it enough to keep going with the other parts.
Okay, Ellie, you kind of touched on this. What was that feeling like when you found someone wearing a piece of Oddli in the wild?
So the first time, sometimes I joke that I repel people in the wild wearing Oddli, because we get like texts every day saying they saw strangers in Oddli, and we have thousands and thousands of people in the pieces now. But the first and only time I saw someone in Oddli was at our first ever company retreat to Disneyland last holiday season. And it was me, Jensen, and our employee, Charlotte. We looked up, and it was funny, we were actually talking about like how Disneyland, per Jensen, my fascination, how Disneyland hits mass culture. Everyone's interested in it. People of all walks of life are there. And we were literally saying, how can we get Oddli to do that? Saying that we don't know if Oddli products would be at Disneyland at that time and place. We look up, we see the name T, which is our most popular piece, the custom piece. And Jensen, of course, she's like, Ellie, go run over and say hi. I think that in future years, the goal would be that they come up to us, like I would have done with a lot of the female consumer founders I really looked up to. But anyways, in that moment, I walked up to the girl. I was like, this is my brand. And then she knew who we were. She and all of her friends had bought pieces and ended up chatting with them for a bit. But it was a cool moment.
And okay, I have to ask, how did you come up with the name Oddli? Where does that stem from?
That we were flipping through a Shel Silverstein book, Where the Sidewalk Ends, and it was the poem Falling Up, and in it we were just reading Shel Silverstein because we were collecting a lot of different like songs, books, poems, movies that we felt like captured the energy that we wanted the brand to feel like as inspiration, because it was really hard to find the right name. And then it said something so odd, and we were like, Oddly. For a while it was going to be Oddly, and then it just stopped. We said we'll stick with it for a week, and honestly we've just fallen more and more in love with the name. I like that it can be a verb and an adjective, and or it can be an adjective and I don't even know, but you can use it in a lot of different ways.
No, I love it. I think even what I actually really love about it is first, it's the actual messaging, right? It's Oddli, like it's unique and it's special. And then it also has this like beautiful positive connotation to it. Whereas like you have even and odd and whatnot, but still like it feels very uplifting and special, which I love. So maybe that's because I'm like thinking of the brand and the clothing, but still perfectly matches. I love that.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going to go on to more fun questions, if you will. And so whoever almost just thinks of their answer first, just kind of speak up. But I would love to know, what is your most contrary yet high conviction opinion that you hold?
I think there's a lot of controversy around, I have so many, but I don't know why this popped into my head. Gen Z being really just the state of Gen Z and how doomsday or dreamers or what they think the world is going to look like. And I would say that I believe in the power of the younger generations and how their brain works. And I think that people are dreamers and doers. And I know that there's a lot coming at us in the world over these next several decades. And I guess that I still have an optimism around what kids are working on and building into.
I mean, I love it. And it's sad in a way that it's the contrary opinion, but I think you're right. Like, I think right now there's this, I don't know, this layer where there is this pessimism, but you know what? Like, yeah, tear it apart and say, look, I think there's actually a beautiful future ahead and we are the ones to kind of pave that. So that's great. Jensen, what craft are you spending a lifetime honing?
Probably art history. I feel like I've kept it purposely for now. You know, I was a tour guide in college at the Cantor and Anderson and spend my weekends often at museums. And I feel like it just is it keeps me grounded in, I guess, yeah, history in general just keeps me grounded in what I'm creating on the day-to-day and a reminder of how much was before me and how objects hold so much power and why we should be careful about what we put into the world. And I think that it's cool. We've built something called Friday Muse as one of our company traditions. Now it's 4 of us, and every Friday it rotates. Someone gives a presentation on some piece of history related to design or fashion, or it could be current, and presents on it. And it often leads into a conversation around some specific time and period and why some part of consumer was doing a certain thing during that time. So yeah, just thinking about history, I feel like is going to be my whole life.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, I always ask this, and since I have both of you here, I'm going to have you answer for the other person. So Ellie, what is Jensen's superpower? We'll start there, and then Jensen will give Ellie's.
Creativity coupled with execution.
I was going to say Ellie's is storytelling and inclusion.
Okay, and obviously you guys have your website. Where else can people find Oddli? I know you're in New York. This episode will be released next week, so hopefully everyone in New York, go check them out. But where else? Where else can they check you guys out?
Come to Juneshine, Brooklyn between 2 and 7 p.m. on Saturday, the 20th.
Amazing. Come
hang out. We'll have lots of fun things there. And then if not, we're probably going to be doing an LA event. And we want to do lots of different events.
Amazing.
But
I love it.
Today on our Instagram for those.
Perfect. All right. You guys, thank you so much. I love Oddli and what you guys have built, but even hearing the story and the people behind it, it just makes it 100 times better. So thank you guys for coming to share your story. I absolutely loved it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Carly.
Thank you, Carly.
Thank you so much for listening to the show this week. If you enjoyed, please spread the word. Tell someone about She Leads or post about it on social media and tag us. If you want to contact us, feel free to send over a message through the She Leads Instagram page at sheleads.show. If you want to follow us on Twitter, our account is at SheLeadsShow, and mine is at Carly Malatsky. This episode was produced and edited by Nick Verschow. Thank you also to our partner, Floodgate. If you're passionate about startups and want to learn more about the starting journey of those who have built groundbreaking companies, I highly recommend listening to Starting Greatness with Mike Maples Jr., the founding partner of Floodgate. He has an incredible show that, in my opinion, is definitely worth your time. Thanks again.